Subscribe because it is free.
The emergency klaxons echoed through the crystalline halls of the Galactic Council headquarters as High Chancellor Zirian slammed all four of his tentacles on the emergency alert button. Around the circular chamber, representatives from across the galaxy materialized in shimmering holo displays, their various appendages twitching with concern. Code red, code red. Zirian's translator crackled with static. We have a Category 5 civilization breach on planet. He squinted at his data pad through compound eyes. Earth. No wait. Dirt ball number 3. Actually, they call it Earth, with some kind of throat noise I can't replicate. The insectoid delegate from Kepler, 442b, clicked his mandibles nervously. Surely you mean those bipedal mammals we assigned to janitorial duties? The ones who barely discovered combustion. Those are the ones, Zirian confirmed, his skin shifting to an alarming shade of purple. And they are no longer our biggest threat. They are our biggest threat. 50 years ago, the Galactic Survey Team had filed their report on humanity with the confidence of beings who had catalogued thousands of primitive species. The lead surveyor, Captain Glorbex, had unfortunately arrived during what humans called a Renaissance fair in medieval England. His official documentation read, "Species exhibits rudimentary tool use, recently mastered fire, employs primitive projectile weapons called bows. Completely harmless. Recommend immediate integration as Class D laborers." The footage from that first contact still played in the Council archives. Glorbex, standing proudly next to a human in chainmail, announcing to the galaxy that Earth's inhabitants were perfect for menial tasks and perhaps some light entertainment. The Council had cheered. Finally, a species that wouldn't challenge their carefully maintained hierarchy. Within months, humans were distributed across the galaxy like a particularly enthusiastic cleaning supply. They mopped floors on Rigel 7, performed simple magic tricks for Centaurian children, and maintained the vast mechanical systems that kept galactic civilization running. The Council patted themselves on their various appendages for finding such an efficient workforce. But then the reports started trickling in. Small things at first. The human assigned to clean the quantum flux capacitors on Station Omega kept asking questions. Why does this button make that noise? And what happens if I press this one instead? Supervisor Blorgoth had dismissed it as typical mammalian curiosity, right up until the humans somehow improved the station's efficiency by 30% while allegedly just cleaning. On Proxima Colony, the human entertainers hired for the governor's birthday party had gone completely off-script. Instead of the traditional juggling routine, they'd started something called stand-up comedy, making jokes about interspecies relationships that had the entire audience, including mortal enemies, laughing together for the first time in recorded history. Most disturbing of all were the friendship reports. Humans possessed an apparently compulsive need to befriend everything they encountered. Security footage showed them having lunch with their supervisors, teaching alien children Earth games, and somehow convincing the notoriously antisocial Vorthan miners to join them for something called happy hour. The Council had initially attributed these anomalies to typical new species adjustment periods. Surely the humans would settle into their assigned roles once they understood the proper order of things. After all, every species had their place in the galactic hierarchy, and the humans' place was clearly at the bottom. They had never been more wrong about anything in their 10,000-year history. 6 months after the initial deployment, the first incident reports began flooding Council databases. Jenkins, a human janitor assigned to the Andromeda Research Facility, had apparently fixed the gravity generators while cleaning them. The facility director, Dr. Quenthus, filed an emergency complaint stating that the generators now operated at 200% efficiency and included what Jenkins called a turbo mode for those really busy days. "We thought it was malfunctioning," Dr. Quenthus explained in his testimony, his crystalline features flickering with confusion. The human kept insisting he'd only given them a proper cleaning and maybe tightened a few loose bits. Our engineers spent 3 weeks trying to understand what he'd done. Turns out he'd accidentally solved a propulsion problem we'd been working on for 2 centuries. The entertainment sector reported even stranger developments. Human performers on Zeta Reticuli had begun incorporating alien technology into their acts, creating what they called fusion performances. A juggler named Rodriguez had somehow convinced the local hologram projectors to create solid light constructs, turning a simple ball-tossing routine into an interdimensional art experience that had tickets selling out for the next 5 years. But the real chaos began when humans started sharing their culture. On Kepler 186f, a human named Chen introduced something called pizza to the local gastropod population. Within weeks, every restaurant on the planet was serving variations of bread with toppings, despite the fact that gastropods absorb nutrients through their skin. The sight of tentacled beings attempting to eat triangle-shaped food became the galaxy's most viral meme. The political ramifications proved even more disruptive. Human concepts like democracy, weekends, and casual Friday spread through alien societies like a benevolent plague. Young Rigelians began questioning why they couldn't vote for their leaders. Centaurian workers demanded something called work-life balance, a phrase that required 17 different translators to explain to their monarchical government. The Vorthan Empire, known for their rigid military hierarchy, nearly collapsed when their soldiers learned about coffee breaks and started requesting them mid-battle. Their supreme commander filed a formal complaint. The humans have infected our troops with the concept of morale. Our efficiency ratings have somehow improved by 300%, but our soldiers now expect team-building exercises and ask about dental benefits. Most alarming was humanity's supernatural ability to befriend anything with a pulse. Reports flooded in from across the galaxy of humans organizing cultural exchange BBQs, where species that had been at war for millennia were suddenly sharing recipes and playing something called beer pong. The ancient blood feud between the Crystalline Collective and the Plasma Federation ended when a human named Dave convinced both sides to settle their differences over a game of volleyball. Ambassador Thexandra of the Galactic Mediation Council submitted her resignation after a human mediator resolved a 3,000-year territorial dispute in 45 minutes by suggesting both sides just share the planet and have a block party. Her final report read, "I have spent 8 centuries learning diplomatic protocol. This human solved everything with snacks and music." The council received daily reports of dangerous levels of galaxy-wide happiness. Crime rates plummeted as former criminals found themselves invited to human-organized community events. Interspecies marriages increased by 4,000%. Most disturbing of all, productivity across every sector had somehow improved despite humans introducing concepts like fun and personal time. High Chancellor Zirian stared at the mounting reports, his tentacles trembling. In 6 months, humans had accidentally revolutionized galactic civilization simply by being themselves. By year 2, the Galactic Council's 10,000-year-old bureaucratic machine was having what humans would call a complete meltdown. The problem wasn't that humans were breaking rules. They were making the rules obsolete simply by talking to each other. The crisis became undeniable when the interdepartmental communication protocol collapsed overnight. For millennia, official requests had to pass through 17 different committees, get stamped by 43 separate approvals, and wait an average of 6 months for processing. Humans had bypassed this entire system by creating something called group chats. Director Vexnala of Administrative Efficiency submitted her emergency report with shaking appendages. The humans are communicating directly across departments. They've formed work groups that solve problems in real time. Yesterday, a maintenance issue that should have taken 8 months to resolve was fixed in 20 minutes because a human janitor texted a human engineer who called a human supervisor who just walked over and looked at it. The council chambers erupted in chaos as representatives tried to comprehend a world where problems got solved immediately instead of being properly buried in paperwork for decades. Meanwhile, the promotion crisis was reaching critical levels. Human competence was accidentally destroying the carefully maintained hierarchy that kept the galaxy functioning. Marcus Thompson, initially hired to empty wastebaskets at Galactic Shipping Industries, had somehow become Regional Operations Director in 3 months. When questioned, his supervisor nervously explained, "Every time we gave him more responsibility to see if he'd fail, he just succeeded better. We kept promoting him hoping he'd reach his incompetence level, but apparently he doesn't have one." The pattern repeated across every sector. Humans weren't climbing the corporate ladder. They were accidentally vaporizing it. Traditional alien managers found themselves in the unprecedented position of being less qualified than their subordinates. The Zephyrian Corporate Council filed a class action complaint stating, Our entire leadership structure is having existential crises. Half our executives are in therapy, and the other half are secretly taking human management courses. The innovation infection proved even more devastating. Humans had introduced the concept of, what if we tried something different? To species that had been doing things the same way for millennia. On Rigel Prime, a human suggested that maybe the planetary transportation system didn't need to break down every Tuesday for maintenance. Within weeks, Rigelian engineers had redesigned their entire infrastructure using something called preventive maintenance and common sense. The Galactic Patent Office received over 10 million new applications in a single month, all variations of human improvements to existing technology. Patent clerk Yorth Gax suffered what his species called a logic loop breakdown, after processing the 500th application for making things work better by fixing the obvious problems nobody mentioned before. Council meetings became increasingly surreal as representatives reported human solutions that seemed impossible yet undeniably worked. The Quantum Computing Division announced that a human intern had solved their century-old calculation bottleneck by suggesting they try turning it off and on again. The resulting efficiency improvement was so dramatic that half the department staff became redundant overnight. Emergency Protocol 7 was activated. Operation Contain the Humans. The plan was simple. Restrict human access to sensitive systems before they accidentally optimized the entire galaxy into chaos. Unfortunately, the committee assigned to implement this plan discovered they needed human IT support to access their own containment protocols. High Chancellor Zirian called the emergency session with a simple declaration that sent ripples through the galactic establishment. We cannot demote the humans without admitting they're better at everything than we are. We cannot restrict their access because we need them to keep everything running. And we absolutely cannot fire them because they've become friends with everyone. The final council emergency session was called when High Chancellor Zirian made a horrifying discovery while reviewing efficiency reports. He stood before the assembled representatives, his translator struggling with the concept he was about to voice. Fellow council members, I have reviewed our galactic operations for the past 3 years. We have achieved unprecedented prosperity, eliminated most conflicts, and reached productivity levels that our ancestors could only dream of. There is only one logical conclusion. The chamber fell silent as representatives leaned forward with whatever appendages they used for listening. We are completely and utterly dependent on the humans for everything. The panic that followed was immediate and absolute. The Crystalline Collective's representative began flickering rapidly, a sign of severe emotional distress. The Vorthan delegate's military composure cracked as he admitted, "My entire fleet runs on human-optimized systems. If they stopped showing up for work, we couldn't even start our engines." Director Kex Lima of Resource Management delivered the final blow. "I've been secretly using human problem-solving techniques for the past year. I don't actually know how to do my job the old way anymore. None of us do." The revelation triggered a cascade of confessions. The Chief Justice admitted to reading human conflict resolution books. The military coordinator had been implementing human team-building exercises. Even the Cultural Preservation Minister had started scheduling mental health days for his staff. But the ultimate irony was yet to be revealed. As the council debated their next move, a new voice cut through the chaos, clear, confident, and speaking perfect High Galactic with flawless diplomatic protocol. "Excuse me, honored representatives." Every head, tentacle, and optical sensor turned toward the source. Standing in the center of the chamber was Sarah Chen, wearing the standard-issue janitor uniform but carrying herself with unmistakable authority. "We've been listening to your concerns," she said, gesturing to the dozen other humans who had quietly entered the chamber. "And we think there might be some confusion about our role here." High Chancellor Zirian's skin shifted through several colors of bewilderment. You can speak High Galactic?" Sarah smiled, that particularly human expression that had been causing diplomatic incidents across the galaxy. "We've been fluent since week 2. We just figured you'd work things out eventually. Besides, the paperwork to officially change our job descriptions looked like a nightmare." The revelation hit the council like a supernova. Marcus Thompson, still wearing his maintenance badge despite running 3 departments, stepped forward. "We knew exactly what we were doing. We just thought you were testing us with that whole primitive species thing. We didn't want to be rude and point out the obvious. Representative Blorgthak managed to croak out. You mean you've been pretending? Not pretending, Sarah corrected gently. Just being polite. You seem so proud of your systems. We didn't want to hurt your feelings by fixing everything too quickly. We figured you'd catch on when you were ready. The human delegation looked around at the assembled alien leadership with genuine affection. Besides, added Dave, the human who had ended the Plasma Federation War, we were having too much fun making friends with everyone. Do you have any idea how cool it is to hang out with actual aliens? This is like every sci-fi movie ever made. The council sat in stunned silence until High Chancellor Zirian began to laugh, a sound his species hadn't made in over a millennium. Soon, the entire chamber was filled with the various sounds of alien laughter, relief, and something that might have been joy. Sarah raised her hand with a final offer. So, want us to teach you about work-life balance seminars? We've got some great team-building exercises planned for next week.